The 1943 film was directed by Zoltan Korda and produced by Columbia Pictures during a critical phase of World War II. The North African campaign had just concluded successfully for the Allies, making it ripe for cinematic dramatization. The movie starred Humphrey Bogart as Sergeant Joe Gunn, capitalizing on his rising stardom following Casablanca, 1942. The film was heavily influenced by propaganda needs. Hollywood collaborated with the U.S. government to produce films that boosted morale, emphasized unity among Allied nations, and demonized Axis powers. Sahara was not just a war story, but a symbolic representation of Allied cooperation in the face of fascism. The 1995 remake was directed by Brian Trenchard Smith and produced for cable television, premiering on Showtime. It starred Jim Belushi as Gunn, with a supporting cast of television actors. Unlike the original, it was not produced during wartime, but in an era of retrospective war dramas and miniseries, such as HBO's The Tuskegee Airmen 1995 and Band of Brothers 2001. This version leaned more toward modern sensibilities in representation, action choreography, and realism. The television format and budget limited its scope compared to the 1943 film, but the remake sought to update the story for a new generation while retaining its classic structure. Both films follow nearly identical plotlines with minor variations. A U.S. tank crew, separated from their unit during the retreat across North Africa, struggles to survive in the desert. Along the way, they pick up a diverse group of Allied stragglers, including a Sudanese sergeant, a British doctor, and others. They discover a desert well, which becomes the focal point of their survival and eventual stand against German forces. Outnumbered, they use the well as bait to lure Axis troops into a battle of attrition. The climax sees most of the group sacrificed in defense of the well, symbolizing Allied resistance. Setting and tone, the 1943 version is tight and symbolic, with limited action sequences but heavy dialogue on unity. The 1995 version expands the battle scenes, adding more modern pyrotechnics and desert cinematography. Ending. Both conclude with the Axis defeated, but the original has a distinctly propagandistic final note, celebrating Allied solidarity, while the remake emphasizes personal sacrifice and gritty realism. Character arcs. In the 1943 film, the characters often serve as allegorical representations of nations. In the 1995 remake, they are given more individualized backstories, reflecting the 1990s emphasis on character-driven drama. Character comparisons. Sergeant Joe Gunn. Humphrey Bogart 1943. Bogart's Gunn is laconic, charismatic, and almost mythic. He embodies American leadership and pragmatism. His moral compass is clear. He insists on discipline, fairness, and sacrifice for the greater good. Bogart's natural star power elevates the role, making Gunn less of a common soldier and more of an American archetype. Jim Belushi 1995. Belushi plays Gunn as rougher, more human, and prone to frustration. His performance mixes toughness with humor, closer to a working man's soldier than Bogart's iconic leader. While lacking Bogart's gravitas, Belushi brings accessibility and realism to the part. 1943, the supporting characters are international archetypes, a British doctor representing calm rationality, a Sudanese soldier symbolizing colonial contributions, and a Frenchman for free France. Each character reinforces Allied unity. 1995, the remake fleshes out these characters with more dialogue and individual quirks. For example, the Sudanese character is portrayed with more cultural depth, reflecting changing attitudes toward representation. The Russian, British, and other Allied figures are given distinct personalities rather than symbolic roles. The German officer. Both films feature captured Axis prisoners, highlighting ideological contrasts. In 1943, the Nazi prisoner is a fanatical caricature, embodying cruelty and inhumanity. In 1995, the German officer is more nuanced, still ruthless but written with a touch of humanity, reflecting the 1990s shift toward complexity in war films. Themes and symbolism. Unity and propaganda. 1943. The original Sahara was a wartime parable. Its key theme was Allied solidarity, Americans, British, Soviets, Free French, and colonized Africans fighting side by side. The desert well symbolizes survival, cooperation, and sacrifice. Each character's nationality is emphasized to reinforce the propaganda message: victory comes through unity. Realism and Individualism. 1995. The remake, free from immediate propaganda goals, focuses on the personal struggles of the soldiers. Themes of exhaustion, mistrust, and moral ambiguity come forward. While unity is still present, it is presented as a fragile, hard-won achievement rather than an inevitable fact. The 1995 Sahara reflects late 20th century war films' tendency toward psychological realism. Filmmaking techniques. Cinematography. 1943, shot in black and white, with stark desert landscapes serving as metaphor for isolation and struggle. The limited special effects and battle scenes rely on tension and suggestion rather than spectacle. 1995, color cinematography emphasizes the harshness of the desert. Battle sequences are larger, with explosions, gunfire, and more visual realism, though constrained by its television budget. Direction and editing. Korda's 1943 film is tightly edited, moving quickly to maintain momentum and morale. Trenchard Smith's 1995 version stretches scenes for character development, reflecting the slower pacing of television drama. Acting styles. Bogart's restrained, iconic presence contrasts with Belushi's more naturalistic, modern acting. Supporting roles in 1943 lean toward archetypal performances, while 1995 embraces more conversational, grounded delivery. Historical context. 1943 audience. Audiences in 1943 were in the midst of global war. The North African campaign had ended, but D-Day was yet to come. Films like Sahara reassured viewers of Allied strength and the righteousness of their cause. Its propaganda elements, emphasizing Allied unity and portraying Nazis as irredeemably evil, fit the era's needs. 1995 audience. By 1995, World War II was remembered with nostalgia and reevaluated through a modern lens. The Cold War had just ended, and audiences were more receptive to morally complex portrayals of war. The remake reflects this by giving Axis characters depth, portraying Allied soldiers as flawed, and stressing survival over ideology. Reception. 1943, Sahara was both a critical and commercial success, praised for its suspense and Bogart's performance. It remains a classic of World War II cinema and a prime example of Hollywood propaganda done effectively. 1995, the remake received mixed reviews. While praised for attempting to modernize the story, it was limited by budget, casting, and inevitable comparisons to the original. Belushi's performance divided critics, with some seeing him as miscast against Bogart's legacy. Conclusion. The two versions of Sahara tell the same story, but serve different purposes. The 1943 film is a wartime artifact, blending suspense, entertainment, and propaganda into a symbolic narrative about Allied unity. It thrives on archetypes, star power, and moral clarity. The 1995 remake attempts to humanize the story, adding psychological realism and updated cultural sensibilities. It presents war as a gritty, personal struggle, rather than a grand ideological conflict. Together, they illustrate how the same story can reflect the needs of its era. Sahara 1943 is timeless for its historical significance and iconic performance by Bogart, while Sahara 1995 represents the evolving lens through which later generations reinterpret World War II. Both films ultimately affirm the same central truth: survival in war depends on cooperation, sacrifice, and resilience against overwhelming odds.